I sit at my sleek, glass desk, the morning sunlight glinting off the edges of my laptop. The hum of the city below feels distant, almost irrelevant, but the vibration of my phone on the polished wood jolts me into reality. Another message from an unknown number flashes across the screen, and a strange mixture of dread and curiosity curls in my stomach. I smooth the silk of my blouse, a soft ivory that brushes against my wrists like a whisper, and glance out at the skyline. It's hard to believe that just a few years ago, my life looked entirely different, chaotic, uncertain, and full of whispered judgments from people who thought they knew me. People like her. Her laughter still echoes in my memory, sharp, mocking, the kind that makes your chest ache with humiliation. The boss's daughter, Claire Harrington, fired me on a Thursday afternoon, smiling as if my career had been a joke. At the time, I wanted to crawl under my desk and disappear. Now, I'm here, in a corner office I worked relentlessly for, my name on the plaque outside the door, my accounts and accomplishments carefully hidden from those who doubted me. I tap the message. A photo attached. It's familiar. My pulse quickens. The past is knocking, and it's impossible to ignore. Some part of me can't help but smile, ironic, patient, knowing. The little girl who trembled at her laugh is gone. And yet, the story isn't over. I remember that day like it was yesterday, even though years have passed. I was 24, full of hope and determination, clutching my leather portfolio as I walked through the glass doors of Harrington and Company, my heels clicking nervously on the marble floor. The office smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood, a comforting mix, but my nerves had other plans. Claire Harrington, with her perfectly curled blonde hair and designer heels, appeared at the doorway of her father's office, smirk in place, as if the entire building belonged to her, and in a way, it did. "Samantha," she said, voice dripping with mock sweetness. "We need to talk." I followed her into the office, trying to steady my trembling hands. The papers on my desk felt suddenly heavy, the notes I had meticulously prepared meaningless in the face of her icy gaze. She circled me like a predator, laughter dancing at the edges of her words. "I just don't think you're cut out for this," she said, and the words hit harder than I could have imagined. "We're going to have to let you go." A lump formed in my throat. I could feel my heartbeat in my temples. My hands shook as I tried to speak, but nothing came out. Around us, the office seemed to blur. The hum of printers, the chatter of coworkers, the click of keyboards, all muted under the sting of humiliation. Then, from the corner of my mind, I remembered Grandma's words from a month before. "Never let anyone else write your story for you, Sam. Your courage is your power." She had pressed a small gold locket into my palm, saying it would remind me to believe in myself, no matter how the world laughed. I had smiled then, not fully understanding. Now, her words were my only anchor. I squared my shoulders and nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I didn't cry, didn't beg. I left that office with my head high, the echo of Claire's laughter following me down the corridor. That moment, as cruel as it was, lit a fire in me. I made a silent vow. I would never be powerless again. That day, I stepped out of the shadow of someone else's mockery and into the uncertain, exhilarating path of my own independence. After leaving Harrington and Company, the world felt both terrifying and alive. The sting of Claire's laughter was still fresh, but somewhere beneath it, a quiet determination began to take root. I rented a small studio apartment in downtown Chicago, with cracked windows that let in the city's pulse and a kitchen that barely fit my imagination, but it was mine. Every detail of that space became my laboratory, my sanctuary. I spent countless nights at the tiny oak desk by the window, notebook open, laptop glowing, sketching out business plans no one would see. Freelance clients trickled in at first, small contracts, unpaid internships, projects that barely covered rent, but I poured everything into them, learning every nuance of marketing, finance, and negotiation. Each late night, the smell of coffee mingled with the faint hum of traffic below, reminding me that I was still moving forward, even if slowly. It was during one of these sleepless nights that I met Daniel Whitman, a seasoned entrepreneur with an eye for talent and a patience I didn't know I deserved. He reviewed my proposals and, instead of judging the flaws, he saw potential. "Samantha," he said over a late-night Zoom call, "you're not failing. You're learning faster than anyone I know. Keep going." That single line of belief became a lifeline, a spark that kept me from giving up. There were setbacks, of course, deals that fell through at the last minute, clients who doubted my age or experience, nights when self-doubt crept in and whispered that Claire had been right. But every small win, my first profitable contract, the first client who praised my work in writing, the first real deposit in my account that screamed independence, felt like sunlight breaking through a storm. I learned to mask my triumphs from the world. Family calls were met with vague updates. Social media was carefully curated. A coffee here, a book there, never a hint of the empire quietly building behind the scenes. The memory of Claire's smirk haunted me, yes, but it also fueled me. Every successful pitch, every closed deal, every client impressed by my meticulous work was a silent answer to that laughter, a quiet triumph that no one could take away. And yet, I never lost touch with my humanity. I celebrated small joys, the smell of rain on the balcony, the satisfaction of a well-written email, the laughter of a friend who understood my struggle. These tiny moments stitched together a life of purpose, resilience, and quiet power. I was no longer the girl trembling at Claire's words. I was Samantha Blake, quietly unstoppable, building a life so full and secret that even she could not have imagined it. It was a sunny afternoon when I invited Claire Harrington and her father, Mr. Harrington, to discuss a potential collaboration. The invitation had been carefully worded, polite, unassuming, the kind that would make them think I still needed something from them. I let the tension sit like a secret seasoning, knowing it would make the reveal taste sweeter. When they arrived, I guided them through the polished lobby of my office building. Every step was deliberate, every detail planned. The floors gleamed under the sunlight, abstract paintings adorned the walls, and the subtle scent of jasmine lingered in the air. Claire's eyes darted around, trying to assess the space, but I could see the hint of unease forming behind her practiced smile. "Have a seat," I said, motioning toward the sleek leather chairs in my corner office. They hesitated, the familiar arrogance in Claire's posture battling the unease she couldn't yet name. I poured coffee and sat across from them, letting the silence stretch. The only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant city traffic. I watched their eyes wander, lingering on the awards framed on the wall, the certificates of achievement, the subtle nods to my growing empire. Finally, I spoke. "Claire, do you remember the day you laughed at me? When you decided I wasn't good enough?" My voice was calm, even, but it carried every ounce of the pain I had felt and the strength I had earned. Claire's smirk faltered. Her hands gripped the armrests of her chair. Mr. Harrington's brows knitted, suspicion creeping in. "Well," I continued, allowing a small, ironic smile, "things have changed since then." I leaned back, letting the view of the skyline behind me underscore the distance I had traveled. "I own half of the company you thought you could mock. The accounts you believed you controlled? Frozen, reorganized, fully under my direction. Every decision I make now shapes the very business you once thought you ruled." The room went silent. Claire's jaw dropped, a faint flush rising to her cheeks. Mr. Harrington's eyes widened, disbelief etched into every line of his face. They had expected a timid, struggling woman, someone still bruised by the past, but what sat before them was a force of competence, elegance, and undeniable authority. I watched as the shock slowly turned to a flicker of guilt in Claire's eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it. The laughter that had haunted me for years died in her throat. This time, the silence was mine. I let the moment linger, savoring the quiet justice of it. The power balance had shifted. The little girl who trembled, who doubted herself, was long gone. In her place was Samantha Blake, unshakable, composed, and untouchable. The room seemed to recognize it before they did. Finally, I stood, smooth and deliberate. "I hope you understand now. Actions have consequences. And in that instant, the last echoes of her laughter faded, replaced by a stunned, reverent silence, the kind that only comes when someone realizes they've underestimated you entirely. I leaned against my desk, letting the weight of my presence settle in the room. Claire's eyes darted between me and the skyline beyond, while Mr. Harrington shifted in his chair, suddenly aware that the old dynamics had completely dissolved. I could let this go. I began, my voice calm but firm, pretend none of this ever happened and we could move forward. But the truth is, some things need to change. I let the words hang in the air, giving them a moment to digest the reality of the power shift. First, Claire, you need to understand the impact of your actions. Laughing at someone, dismissing their potential, it doesn't just hurt, it leaves scars. If you want to work with me, it will be on the condition that you prove genuine respect, that you leave arrogance behind, and that you commit to learning rather than assuming. I'll mentor you, but only if you're willing to grow. Claire swallowed, a flicker of humility breaking through the stunned expression. I could see it, a mixture of shame, curiosity, and the first sparks of recognition that perhaps she had underestimated more than just me. Then, turning to her father, I continued, and you, Mr. Harrington, need to recognize that authority without accountability is dangerous. If we are to collaborate, you will step back from micromanaging, allow me to lead, and trust in the people you've dismissed before. Your role is guidance, not control. The company thrives only if respect and responsibility are present at every level. I paused, letting my gaze sweep over them both. This isn't about revenge. It's about integrity, growth, and making sure no one in this room repeats past mistakes. You will not return to old patterns, and if you do, there will be consequences. But if you can embrace this, if you can truly change, we can build something stronger together. I watched their expressions shift. Claire's shoulders softened, a tentative nod forming. Mr. Harrington's face, once confident and commanding, now carried the weight of reflection. They had realized, finally, that power without humility is empty and that the consequences of underestimating someone can last far longer than a single laugh. I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The fire that had driven me through those years of struggle had led me here, to a place where compassion and authority could coexist. I wasn't seeking punishment. I was creating a path for them to meet me on my terms, and for all of us to grow stronger. For the first time in years, I allowed myself a small smile. This was the kind of power that didn't rely on fear, but on respect. And finally, the story wasn't just about what they had done to me, it was about what we could become, together if we embrace change. Weeks passed, and the changes were subtle at first, but undeniable. Claire approached projects with a new humility, listening instead of assuming. She asked questions, sought guidance, and, in small ways, began to undo the arrogance that had once defined her. I saw glimpses of the woman she could become, capable, considerate, and grounded. Mr. Harrington, too, shifted. He learned to step back, to let others lead, and to value their perspectives. I could see the relief in his posture, the tension of control slowly dissolving. The company, once teetering under the weight of mismanagement, began to flourish in the balance of authority and respect. And me? I finally allowed myself to pause, to breathe. I walked through my office, touching the gold locket my grandmother had given me all those years ago. It hung quietly around my neck, a reminder of courage, resilience, and the woman I had always been capable of becoming. That tiny piece of jewelry had guided me through humiliation, struggle, and long nights of uncertainty. Now, it rested lightly against my chest, a symbol of triumph. I reflected on the journey. The firing, the laughter that had once hurt me so deeply, the nights of doubt, the victories both secret and public. Every moment had shaped me, molded me into someone who could lead with both strength and grace. I realized that the power I had built wasn't just financial or professional, it was personal, emotional, and indestructible. Sitting back in my chair, I looked out over the city skyline, the sunlight catching the glass towers like a celebration. I allowed a small, serene smile to form. The girl who trembled, who felt powerless in Claire's presence, no longer existed. She had been replaced by Samantha Blake, a woman who understood her worth, claimed her space, and transformed the laughter of the past into the quiet confidence of the present. And as the city hummed below, I whispered to myself, almost like a final note in my own story, I am the author of my life, and no one else will ever write it for me. The past had tried to define me, but the present and the future were entirely mine.